The hearing room was silent until that one question shattered it. Who does the FBI work for? It should have been an easy answer, but what followed didn't just expose a man's hesitation, it exposed a system shifting in real time. The way Patel paused, recalibrated, and spoke like every word had been rehearsed wasn't just careful, it was calculated. And in that moment something changed. You could feel it. The crowd wasn't reacting to his words. They were reacting to what he didn't say. Because sometimes silence tells you more than any confession ever could. He began with a polished smile and a bureaucratic tone.
Ultimately, the White House and the chain of command there.
So the FBI works for the White House?
No, the FBI is a member of the Department of Justice and has been the long-standing application.
And who does the Department of Justice work for?
They're in the executive branch, as all members do at the White House.
Attorney General Bondi gave a different answer when I asked her the same question, that they work for the Constitution and the American people. President Trump's made clear in public statements he wants to use the FBI to persecute political adversaries. He's publicly said that folks ranging from Liz Cheney to Adam Kinzinger to former Vice President Harris should be investigated and criminally prosecuted. If President Trump were to order you to open an investigation into any of these individuals, let's say Vice President Harris, would you?
Senator, this question speaks directly to my ability to leave political bias and allow independent behavior to be the only guiding light. As a public defender, I learned that in the harshest of arenas. And any law enforcement investigation, if I'm confirmed at the FBI, will only be launched on the following qualification: a factual, articulable, legal basis to do so. The president has said publicly that he will allow the FBI to remain independent, and I have said as much as well.
So if FBI agents brought to you a factual legal basis, predication, and you are about to refer it to a prosecutor, and you get a call from the White House saying, don't proceed. This is a major donor. This is someone close to the president. This is inappropriate. What would you do?
Simple. I think you answered it partially in your question. The line agents, the brick agents who are trained to bring investigations on behalf of the FBI will make that decision-making process, and they will only have my full support so long as it upholds absolutely every value of the Constitution, and that's it.
So your predecessor, I went back and looked, and I asked the same questions of Director Comey and Director Wray. Director Wray, quoting former Attorney General Bell, said, "You should be willing to resign, if necessary, over conduct if you're pressed to engage in it that's unethical, illegal, or unconstitutional. If pressed by the president, would you resign?"
Senator, my answer is simply, I would never do anything unconstitutional or unlawful, and I never have in my 16 years of government service.
Would you be willing to resign the post of FBI director if pressed and given no choice but to obey the order or resign?
Senator, I will always obey the law.
Does obeying the law require you to, as Attorney General Bell said, as FBI Director Wray said, refuse the order or resign?
I'm not familiar with the extent of the law that you're referring to, but my answer is simple in my 16 years of government service. We will simply follow the law. And I've done that in Obama Justice Department, in Republican Justice Departments, in the Obama military, in Republican civilian capacity. I have never once wavered from my constitutional oath of office.
Mr. Patel, your predecessors in this role have been clear that they would be willing to resign if forced or directed to do something unethical or illegal. I'll proceed. One of your past statements that's concerned me, it's both a post on Truth Social and something you said in a podcast, the Sean Morgan report, that your predecessor, Chris Wray, has broken the law. We need to prosecute him. The FBI should go after people like him. And the month before this, in July 2023, you said there should be a criminal referral for FBI Director Wray. If confirmed, are you going to follow through on these previous statements that Director Wray needs to be prosecuted?
Senator, this reminds me of the conversation you and I had, which I greatly appreciated. There is enough violent crime in this country and enough national security threats to this country that the FBI is going to be busy going forward preventing 100,000 overdoses, 100,000 rapes, and 17,000 homicides.
We agree that prosecuting violent crime should be the principal focus of the FBI. What I'm trying to get to, Mr. Patel, is a whole series of very troubling, to me and many other statements you've made about instead using it to pursue those who might be viewed as political opponents.
And as I told you in your office, I have no interest, no desire, and will not, if confirmed, go backwards. There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as the FBI director. I told you that in your office, and I'll tell you that again today.
Thank you for that statement. As the co-chair of the Law Enforcement Caucus with Senator Cornyn, one of the things I've worked hard on, and I hope to continue being able to work hard on with this administration, is partnership between federal, state, and local law enforcement to pursue violent crime. You did say, as my colleague asked, and I look for a longer answer, that you want to close the FBI Bureau's headquarters on day one. How would shutting down the FBI headquarters impact its ability to prosecute violent crime and drug traffickers? How is that possibly a serious proposal, Mr.
Thank you
Patel?
for bringing that up and allowing me to answer. It was to highlight the significantly greater point that I was actually making in that interview, which is well documented over and over again. 38,000 FBI employees, 7,500 FBI employees work in the Washington field office and Hoover building alone. If you increase that aperture just slightly to encompass the National Capital Region, that is 11,000 FBI employees work in the National Capital Region. A third of the workforce for the FBI works in Washington, D.C. I am fully committed to having that workforce go out into the interior of the country, where I live, west of the Mississippi, and work with sheriff's departments and local officers, and having one agent prevent one homicide, and having one agent in Washington prevent one rape. And I will do that over and over and over again, because the American people deserve the resources, not in Washington, D.C., but in the rest of the country.
And Mr. Patel, frankly, if that had been your statement, that would be something that would be defensible. It's the rest of it, saying you're going to turn it into a museum of the deep state, that causes repeated questions and concerns from people like myself. Thank you, Mr. Patel.
The FBI reports to the Deputy Attorney General, who reports to the Attorney General, and ultimately to the White House. It sounded harmless, procedural, but for anyone who understands power, it was a warning wrapped in politeness. The implication was clear. The Bureau's chain of command ended not in the Constitution, but in the Oval Office, and that quiet reordering of loyalty from law to leadership wasn't a mistake, it was a message. For decades, every FBI director who sat in that chair had made one thing clear: we work for the law, not the president. That line was sacred. It's what allowed the FBI to investigate corruption in any administration, Republican or Democrat, without political interference. But Patel's version blurred that line, and that's when Senator Coons stepped in, pressing the question everyone watching was silently asking: so the FBI works for the White House? Patel smiled again, carefully deflecting. No, Senator, the FBI is part of the Department of Justice. But Coons wasn't satisfied. And who does the Department of Justice work for? Patel hesitated. They're in the executive branch, as all members are. That hesitation was everything. Because in that pause, America saw something it hadn't seen in a long time, an FBI director uncertain where his loyalty stopped. The real story here isn't about the hearing, it's about what that answer represents. A quiet transformation of justice itself. While most of America argues over tweets and headlines, the machinery of power is being re-engineered piece by piece, word by word, oath by oath. The Patel confirmation hearing wasn't about policy, it was about power and how it's defined when truth becomes negotiable. For context, Patel's record was already controversial, not for scandals or crimes, but for something far more dangerous: his loyalty. In past interviews, he'd echoed the idea that the so-called deep state had sabotaged the previous administration. To his supporters, that made him a hero. To his critics, it made him a risk. Because putting someone who believes the system is corrupt in charge of the system doesn't reform it, it weaponizes it. That's why Senator Coons' line of questioning wasn't random, it was deliberate. He wasn't asking about management structure, he was asking about integrity. The FBI's power doesn't come from force, it comes from faith. Faith that it serves justice, not politics. And that's exactly what Patel's answer quietly undermined. Then came the moment that sent a ripple through the hearing room. Coons asked what would happen if the White House ordered Patel to investigate a political opponent, say a former vice president or a senator. Patel's response: a maze of words. The FBI will only act based on factual, articulable legal predicates, he said. It sounded responsible, but it wasn't the answer that mattered, it was the word missing from it. He never said no. Every FBI director before him had made it clear, if ordered to do something illegal or unethical, they would refuse or resign. Patel, he dodged. I will always obey the law. It sounded noble. But under a politicized system, the law becomes whatever those in power decide it means. That's how obedience turns into complicity. This is the brilliance and the danger of bureaucratic loyalty. You don't need a dictator barking orders when you have officials who redefine obedience as virtue. That's how institutions collapse quietly, not in chaos, but in order, not through rebellion, but through submission. And this isn't speculation, it's a pattern. Every time Patel was asked a direct moral question, he turned it into a legal one. Every time he could have chosen clarity, he chose comfort. It's the kind of rhetorical gymnastics that sound sophisticated but mean nothing. Because when you strip away the jargon, you're left with a man unwilling to draw a line. Coons tried again. If you were ordered to do something unconstitutional, would you resign? Patel replied, I will always obey the law. Coons pressed further. Does obeying the law mean refusing the order or resigning? Patel looked calm. In my 16 years of service, I've always followed the law. It was circular, evasive, and deliberate. That's when it became clear, this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a philosophy. Patel wasn't there to defend independence. He was there to redefine it. To turn the FBI's loyalty from principle to hierarchy, from justice to obedience, and for anyone paying attention, it was obvious. Because when the most powerful law enforcement agency in America stops seeing independence as strength, democracy doesn't end overnight. It dies quietly, under fluorescent lights and polite applause. The transformation isn't dramatic, it's administrative. Press releases still say rule of law, agents still file reports, press conferences still happen, but somewhere deep inside the system, priorities shift. Investigations that should advance stall quietly, others that serve political aims move faster, and soon truth itself becomes negotiable. The scariest part, it doesn't look like tyranny, it looks like business as usual. Patel's rise wasn't an accident, it was part of a long strategy to replace resistance with reliability, to make obedience look like order, and to ensure that those who question authority become the new definition of disloyal. That's how you control a system built to resist control. You don't destroy it, you reshape it from within. And that's what this moment represents. A slow calculated bending of the American justice system, from equal under law to aligned with power. Now imagine the ripple effects. An FBI that subtly prioritizes loyalty over law. A Justice Department that quietly aligns with political interests. A system that still uses the language of legality while its meaning shifts underneath. The surface looks stable, but underneath, everything's changing. Observers have already noticed. Reports suggest some career agents are uneasy, worried that the Bureau's focus is drifting. Rumors say some investigations have already been quietly redirected. Nothing confirmed, nothing public, but that's how it starts. Not with a bang, but with silence. And it's not the first time this happened. History has seen it before, in moments when loyalty became currency and independence became liability. When institutions designed to protect freedom became instruments to preserve power. Those who don't see the pattern aren't paying attention. Senator Coons understood that. His tone wasn't theatrical, it was careful, methodical, almost weary. He knew the hearing wasn't about Patel's competence, it was about whether the system could still protect itself. Would you resign, he asked. If given an unlawful order, that wasn't a question, it was a mirror. And Patel's reflection was unsettling. Because democracy doesn't just depend on elections, it depends on refusal, the willingness of powerful people to say no when power demands obedience. And Patel's refusal to refuse said everything. As Patel spoke, his words echoed a deeper truth about modern power. It doesn't need violence. It doesn't need fear. It just needs compliance dressed as professionalism. That's what makes it so effective, and so dangerous. What makes this story so haunting isn't Patel's ambition, it's how ordinary it feels. He's calm, polite, qualified. That's the point. You don't feel the system bending when the people doing it sound reasonable. That's how trust erodes without anyone noticing. The FBI's independence was once seen as sacred. It allowed the Bureau to investigate presidents, expose corruption, and defend the Constitution. But when the line between service and submission fades, justice stops being blind and starts being selective. That's what makes Patel's confirmation more than just politics. It's a preview, a quiet signal that the rules are being rewritten in real time. And if people don't pay attention, they'll wake up one day to realize that the law didn't protect them, it protected those who controlled it. So the question remains, who does the FBI work for? Patel gave his answer in bureaucratic terms, but the truth, it's no longer clear, because independence doesn't vanish with a declaration, it fades through 1,000 small decisions, 1,000 cautious silences, 1,000 moments when someone could have said no, but didn't. And that's where America finds itself today, not at the edge of collapse, but at the edge of compromise. If you've made it this far, ask yourself what happens when the people meant to uphold the law start redefining it. When silence becomes safety, when obeying orders replaces doing what's right. Democracy doesn't collapse all at once, it crumbles slowly, when citizens stop noticing, when hearings like this become routine, when accountability becomes optional. That's why this story matters. Because every democracy falls the same way, when those who could speak up choose to stay quiet. So if you're watching this, don't just scroll past it, talk about it, share it, keep the conversation alive, because the moment people stop paying attention, power stops asking permission. Stay informed, stay alert. And if you want to understand the next big story before it breaks, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications, because what's coming next could change everything.